Welcome to the home screen of the Cast SBOM Manager. After downloading and installing the Cast SBOM Manager and launching it, you will be presented with a screen like this. Now, obviously, I've already got some SBOMs on this screen. The first time you install it, you would not see any SBOMs because you haven't created any yet. But in this case, you could see here on the home screen, I've just got a quick summary of what's going on within my SBOM Manager. I've created 5 SBOMs so far. It gives me a summary of the total number of licenses, the policies I have available, the total number of vulnerabilities across my SBOMs. So let's show some of the fundamental kind of key capabilities of the product, and we'll see how it works in action. So first, very simple thing is if I want to create a new SBOM, simply I click on the Create SBOM tile. I can select one of my existing SBOMs, or I could create a new SBOM, right? I just go ahead and name it. I can give it a name for the product. I can give it a project name, and then I can give it a version. I can then select what license policy I want to apply. By default, I'm just going to select my policy, which is kind of our pretty much industry standard risk policy for license risk. I then can choose the source of the SBOM. Where is it going to come from? So there's a few different options here. I can simply point it to a folder, a local folder, and scan the source code of an application. I can upload the results from an application already in Cast Highlight. Here's one of the connections between the SBOM Manager and Cast Highlight. So if I already have an application in Cast Highlight, I can simply grab the CSV zip file that was produced by the code reader and import it here. I can import a Cyclone DX SBOM, and I have a couple other options here. I can, analyze a compressed archive file, or I could actually point it at a Git repository. I enter the repo information, and it will go ahead and scan that repository automatically. So we're providing a number of options for scanning and creating a new SBOM. I'm going to simply pick one of my local folders. I'm just going to pick a random application here, and I'm going to choose that. Now, there's a number of options that you can select when creating a new SBOM. I can add some exclusions and filters. I'm not going to select any of those. I can decide to use certain types of scanners, such as the Maven, NPM, Yarn scanner. I can turn those on and off, etc. And then I have some other options here, whether I only want to compare the scan to what's in my current catalog of components that I've already been building up through the last SBOMs that I've been using, or I could have it go against the Cast knowledge base, the Cast SCA knowledge base. So I want to make sure that I'm matching it up against the knowledge base Cast has of 100 million plus open source and third-party components. And I could further refine that, scan how tailored or refined do I want that scan to be, to kind of help reduce noise or false positives. So I'm going to leave it on focusing on only known components so that I reduce a little bit of the noise there. I then get a quick summary of what I've chosen for this SBOM creation, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish that. So that's going to be running in the background. So you'll see that this is running. But to continue with the demo, I'm going to use some existing SBOMs that I already have created in my SBOM Manager. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to pick one. Let's pick one of these here. And I'm going to start at what we call our dashboard view. Here is one SBOM that I've chosen. I have a product called CRM. I have a project called Lead Management. And here's the version of the SBOM I've created. And at this dashboard level, I get access to some summary statistics and metadata, kind of a visual representation of my SBOM, the number of components, the number of files, number of licenses. You kind of get the idea. I'm not going to go through every single tile here, but you could see some very interesting things like, the top 10 component licenses that are represented in this SBOM. I could see file extensions in this nice pie chart here. So some pretty cool kind of summary statistics and metadata on this SBOM. Let's take a look a little bit lower into this SBOM. So I'm going to go down now to the components level. So now I've drilled from that summary dashboard down to the actual list of components that makes up this SBOM. You can see here I have 214 of them in total. Now over here on the left, I have some different categories of components. Right now, I'm looking at the open source components. So these are the open source components that the CAST SBOM manager has automatically been able to match with an open source component in the CAST knowledge base when it's scanned or imported, or however we created this SBOM originally. You can see my other SBOM has scan had finished while we were here. I also have other categories like proprietary components, components I want to exclude from my SBOM, a sandbox, which we'll talk about, and an undefined category, which we'll talk about. So I'll come back to those categories, but I wanted to quickly reference those. So one of the things you could do in the SBOM manager that makes it a little bit unique, that you don't have the ability to do in CAST Highlight, is you could start enriching the data about your components in your SBOM. So let's take, for example, one of these components here, this second one. I'm going to click on this action menu. I have a few options here. I could view the files, I can edit the component, change the category. I'm going to go ahead and edit this component. And when doing that, this brings up this individual component where I could start editing the description. I can make edits to the licenses, for example. Let's say this was, for example, a dual license component. You'll often see scenarios where a component is actually published with multiple licenses, and it's up to the user to choose the license they're going to use. So in that case, if this were a component that was dual license, when I open this screen up, I might have seen dual licenses here. Now, in the CAST SBOM manager, I have the ability to choose the license I'm going to use. And in this case, let's say I'm going to choose to use the AFL 2.0 license. So I'm simply going to remove the GPL 2.0 license, right? I can add some additional information on versions, dependencies, things of that nature. So there's a lot of enrichment and additional comments here that I can make to the component. Again, these are capabilities that were not possible in CAST Highlight. Now I have the ability to add a lot more metadata and enrichment of the information associated with this component, and then I can go ahead and save that. Now, when I make those changes, that will be saved so that if whenever I create another version of this SBOM, those changes will be pulled forward, and I won't have to always update those. So that's another advantage here. Let's say there's a scenario where I need to create a proprietary component. This is the open source third-party stuff, but I'm a software vendor. We have our own components that our development team is building. So what I can do is I can now come to this category here called undefined. And what I'll see is that the CAST SBOM manager found, almost 10,000 files that it could not match to a known open source or third-party component. Well, maybe that's because some of these files are actually part of a proprietary component. If I click on that numeral, it's going to bring up a list of all those files. And from this screen, I can quickly identify files that I know make up my proprietary component. So I'm going to just select a few here randomly just for purposes of the demonstration. So I picked these 4 files. These 4 files make up my proprietary component that I need to declare in my SBOM that I'm producing for various purposes, if I have a client that's requesting this. So I've selected those 4. I'm going to now, I could move them to an existing component, but I'm actually, in this case, going to create a component. I'm going to create a name for this, my T1 component. I can add a description, and I will create that. Now what's going to happen when I click that create button is that is going to take those files out of the unknown category. And when I go back to components, it's going to drop them into this sandbox. This is a place, kind of a holding place, for me to now take new components that I'm creating and defining within my SBOM and modify them. So here I can go ahead and edit this component. I can, for example, continue adding various elements. I'm going to actually move it to the proprietary category. I can say, okay, I know that has this vulnerability. This is the license that I'm going to, publish this on. I have various options that I can go ahead and save here. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now when I click on this proprietary category, I see that I have this new component that I have created that is part of this SBOM. Anytime I scan future versions of this application to produce a new version of the SBOM, it will automatically flag and identify those 4 files that I just declared are part of this component and automatically classify it as this proprietary component so that I don't have to do that manually every time I create a new version of this SBOM. In fact, what I could do further is I could go ahead and say I want to add this to my catalog. So by now adding this proprietary component to my catalog, what's happened is this is now available to be reused across all of my SBOMs. So if I'm scanning a completely different application and the CAST SBOM manager detects these 4 files, it's going to automatically identify that as belonging to this proprietary component, classify it, and I don't have to manually go through those steps that I just went through, even though I'm scanning a completely different application because I've added it to the catalog within the CAST SBOM manager. We'll take a quick look at the catalog in a moment so you can see it there. The last thing I'm going to do within this SBOM screen is I'm going to go one level deeper to what's called the file map. This is a level below components where I could actually visually explore the entire file structure of an SBOM down to the file level. So in some cases, this might be useful for users if they're trying to find files or identify the files that make up a custom or proprietary component. So you have the entire file structure available here visually. At any point while I'm using the CAST SBOM manager, I can export my SBOM. I simply click on the export button and I'll see a little pop-up here. I have a few different output formats: Excel, Word, Cyclone DX. I have options on what to include, what categories of components to include in that SBOM, and I click OK, and then that would produce that SBOM file. So you can automatically produce and generate that SBOM at any point in time. All right, I quickly mentioned before the component catalog, so let's take a quick look at that. This catalog is essentially a universal catalog of components that I am using and sharing across all of my SBOMs. So I have some from an open source perspective that previously I decided to push from individual SBOMs into the catalog. But what's more interesting is this proprietary category, and you can see here that that component I just created a couple of moments ago from that SBOM that we were looking at is now part of the catalog and universally available across all of my SBOMs. So again, if these specific files that make up that component, that proprietary component, are detected in some future scan by any application, I will automatically have it defined as this my P1 component that I defined because it's part of the universal catalog. Okay, one of the cool things within the catalog is, let's say I have a proprietary component and it's actually being detected on multiple SBOMs. I could quickly, come over here to this actions menu, click on this option, find usages, and it will tell me where exactly does this component appear. Right now it only appears in one of my SBOMs, but let's say I had 10, 12, 15 SBOMs and this appeared in 5, I would see a list of all of the SBOMs that are using this component. So that's a useful, kind of handy, quick search to find out where this particular component or proprietary library is being used across my library of various SBOMs. The next part of the SBOM manager is licenses. So here's a list of all the licenses available in the SBOM manager that are automatically detected. Again, you have the option to modify these. Let's say you actually want to add some comments to a particular license or some type of enrichment. You can go ahead and open up any of these licenses. You can edit the license, add a description, you can change certain details, certain texts of this. So you essentially are able to enrich licenses the same way that you can enrich the metadata of a component like we were looking at a few moments ago. You also have the opportunity to find where a certain license appears across your SBOM. So if I'm concerned about a particular license and I want to know, okay, which of my applications or SBOMs are using this license, I can click on that and it'll bring up, well, I'm not using this license in any of my SBOMs, but if I did, I'd see a list of all the SBOMs where that particular license was being used or is part of the SBOM. Similar to licenses, we have a very similar view for vulnerabilities. Here's a list of all of the vulnerabilities that have been detected across my SBOMs currently detected or being housed in my SBOM manager. Again, I can enrich the actual vulnerability data. So if I want to go ahead and update the description in here, add some additional references, I have the ability to do that. I also have the ability to find where certain vulnerabilities appear, so I can quickly, find vulnerable SBOMs, and I could see that this CVE appears in this SBOM. If it appeared in multiple SBOMs, I would see the list of the SBOMs that are exposed to this particular CVE. So again, a very quick search capability to understand your level of exposure across multiple SBOMs and multiple applications. One of the things that we can do in the last two areas that we're at is we could actually create and define our own licenses and vulnerabilities. So back in licenses, I could actually create my own license. So let's say I am defining a new license for proprietary component. I can define a license, name it, give it some metadata, description, define a category, and I could even specify the specific legal properties. So I can, pick some properties here, identify things that it can and cannot do. And now I have created a new license that's available for me to apply to components in my catalog. So if we go back to the proprietary components, this component that I was creating here earlier, if I go ahead and edit this component, I now have the option to add that new license. And this is the license that now applies to that component that I created earlier in this session. So the Cast SBOM Manager, this is kind of a very unique capability here, is the ability to create your own and define your own custom licenses. We actually haven't seen that capability in other technologies like this. And I also do have the ability, if I choose, to create my own custom vulnerabilities. So in some cases, this might be necessary, just like I did with the custom license. I can define, name a vulnerability, add a description, additional references, and things of that nature. That hopefully gives you a quick overview of the capabilities of the Cast SBOM Manager.